United Nations Secretary General António Guterres has described the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip as a, quote, horror show. Guterres told the UN Security Council that the system of distributing aid in the Gaza Strip is being denied the conditions to function, he said. The Secretary General made the stark warning with Israel continuing a ground offensive in the Gazan city of Deir al Balah and health officials in Gaza reporting dozens of deaths from malnutrition.
A crowd of Palestinians rush a truck carrying flour in the northern Gaza Strip. The UN World Food Programme says Gaza's hunger crisis has reached new and astonishing levels of desperation. According to a statement by the Hamas-run Health Ministry on Tuesday, more than 100 people in Gaza have died of starvation just in the last few days. The UN estimates that a third of the population is going without any food for multiple days in a row.
I swear it's been 4 days since we've eaten and I can't stand. Look at my hands shaking. We can't stand. My son is crying, telling me, I want to eat, Dad.
Israel has repeatedly dismissed reports of widespread starvation in Gaza, saying it's permitting humanitarian aid, including food, to enter the territory. But humanitarian groups say the trickle of supplies that Israel is allowing into Gaza is not nearly enough. And then there's the perilous process of trying to access aid. According to the UN, more than 1,000 Gazans have been killed since May while seeking food, mostly near distribution sites run by the US-managed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The Israeli army says it's only fired warning shots near aid sites, but witnesses say Israeli forces regularly fire at crowds heading to collect food.
People go to the aid site in Zakim, but instead of leaving with a bag of flour, they leave in a bag of flour, dead or with an amputated leg, with both legs amputated.
As Israeli forces expand ground operations in Deir al Balah in central Gaza, aid agencies are warning of significant disruption to their operations. The World Health Organization said one of its main warehouses in Deir al Balah was hit, and the medical supplies stored there are now lost.
And for a closer look, let's bring in Olga Cherevko. She's the spokesperson of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and joins us from Amman in Jordan tonight. Welcome to DW. We've been getting reports of more deaths from hunger and malnutrition in the past 48 hours. That's, of course, something your organization is also monitoring very closely. What are you hearing?
Thanks a lot for having me. Yes, these very disturbing reports seem to be accelerating in the rate that they're being received. And what we've been, of course, monitoring and what we've been speaking about is the fact that malnutrition rates have been going up for the last 4 months and they continue to soar. And the issue with this crisis, the starvation crisis and the hunger crisis, is that now that it has been going on for so many months, it has manifested itself so obviously in many people. And the fact that it is so visible and so obvious now means that it has been happening and progressing and deteriorating for these many months. And because of that, it's going to actually accelerate the deterioration rate and become worse and worse unless the situation is addressed urgently.
At the same time, and maybe that's the reason of it all, finding food in Gaza is not just hard, it's also become more and more dangerous. There are almost daily reports of Palestinians being killed while trying to access aid, and it seems that the options are either starvation or risking death trying to get food.
That's exactly it. I have spoken to multiple people who have told me exactly this, that they cannot fathom watching their own children starve in front of their eyes. So they have to do something. And that something is often having to risk your life to find food because it has all but disappeared from the shelves and from the markets. And it's virtually impossible to find anything to eat these days.
This is a context in which, of course, many of your colleagues, if not all of them, who are left in Gaza are Gazans themselves, and they're affected by all of this while trying to provide aid to people who are in dire need. They're also putting themselves at an incredible risk day after day. How are UN staff coping under these conditions?
That's correct. Of course, the staff are under immense pressure and are performing under these very difficult and dangerous circumstances. I mean, what we do, of course, is we try to be there for each other and try to be a team, as we always have, despite the circumstances. And we, as the UN and as the humanitarian community, have stayed and delivered there since the beginning. And of course, we're planning to continue doing so. But every time I leave Gaza for a few days, when I come back, I'm absolutely aghast at how much worse it has become, and now I'm horrified to even think about how much worse it will have gotten once I go back this week.
How do you expect this new Israeli offensive in Deir al Balah in central Gaza to affect aid operations and the overall situation in the Gaza Strip?
Well, it's already affecting the situation and our operations, which have already been extremely constrained. And because of these displacement orders that are being issued, and this latest one that you mentioned for Deir al Balah that came two days ago, it has affected dozens of our UN and our partners' facilities, which include our guest houses, several of which have been actually damaged and struck, and as well as warehouses, which have also sustained damage, as well as multiple medical points and water infrastructure. And the water infrastructure in particular is extremely critical because it includes the southern desalination plant, on which hundreds of thousands of people rely on for drinking water. And any damage to these facilities would be absolutely devastating.
How much longer can this go on before the entire aid distribution system in Gaza collapses, or are we perhaps already past that point?
Well, we've been asking ourselves this question for months now, actually, because it just doesn't seem, we seem to be hitting rock bottom and then sinking even lower. And it's just, it doesn't seem to have an end in sight. And of course, amid this, there are more than 2 million people's lives that are at stake. And unless we can address this very, very urgently, already irreversible damage has probably been done. And of course, we already know that preventable deaths are happening already because the situation is not addressed. And all we're asking for is to be enabled to do our work the way that we have done, the way that we have shown that we can do effectively and efficiently during the last ceasefire. And so what needs to happen is, again, unrestricted entry of aid into Gaza over a sustained period of time, and conditions on the ground for us to be able to deliver it safely.
Yeah, you've been calling on the Israeli government to facilitate the entry of aid since this conflict began, and already before that. The relationship between the UN and Israel right now is not the best, to put it mildly, I'd say. Are there talks between you and OCHA and the Israeli government at all right now? Are you in direct communications with the government of Israel?
Yes, we are in constant contact, and we will continue to be in constant contact with the Israeli authorities to request additional access and to request conditions to be in place for us to address the suffering of the people, because that is ultimately our job as humanitarians, is to prevent and address and reduce suffering of the people who are caught in humanitarian crises like Gaza.
There's Olga Cherevko, spokesperson of UN OCHA. Always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're joined now by Michael Lynk, the former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. United Nations Secretary-General António Guterres has described the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip as a horror show with a level of death and destruction without parallel in modern times. How would you describe what's going on?
I think we're running out of adjectives in the English language to convey the full horror of what is being perpetrated in Gaza. And increasingly, I must say, the term genocide is being used in polite company, both to describe both legally and socially what is happening in Gaza. In April, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said that Israel appears to be inflicting on Palestinians in Gaza conditions of life that are increasingly incompatible with their continued existence as a group in Gaza. I think these carefully chosen words are an unmistakable reference to the wording used in the 1948 Genocide Convention. And I'll mention as well as just one example, in June of 2025, Martin Griffiths, who was the UN Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs until 2024, and who oversaw the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, said that above all, how we wind up classifying the carnage in Gaza winds up mattering. Words carry consequences and must trigger concrete steps. When the legal threshold for genocide is met, he said, we must call it genocide and act accordingly. I endorse those words.
Michael, do you think we have passed a point where international law still meaningfully governs the behaviour of governments?
That's a difficult argument to be able to make that it's effective in these days. International law, certainly over the last 3.5 years, has been badly weakened, both by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and obviously by Israel's military assault in Gaza. Indeed, look, I say this as an international lawyer, we have all the international law that we wind up needing to prohibit Israel's conduct in Gaza and in Palestine. We have very clear definitions of what war crimes are, of what crimes against humanity. Indeed, we have a former Israeli prime minister saying just in the last 2 weeks that he thinks what is going on in Gaza are war crimes being committed by his country. What we lack is enforceability and accountability. It takes sustained political will in order to enforce international law. And if one or two major international powers refuse to impose accountability and justice, then international law becomes only words on paper.
Yeah, you refer to a joint statement by 28 nations, among them some of Israel's closest allies, criticising Israel's actions in Gaza. Germany and the US were not among the signatories. Is there really a way to change the fate of Gazans without US and German support for such statements?
Well, that's a very good point. As we know, between the United States and Germany, somewhere between 90 to 95% of all weapons imports into Israel come from those two countries. And what they do winds up mattering. The statement made by the 26 nations in the global north, I think, is important, but I think it's not going to matter much if they're only words on paper. I think what can be done, and these are tools that are in the political toolbox of the global north, is to impose sanctions upon Israel. Israel has felt really very little political cost over the last 22 months for how it's conducted its military campaign in Gaza. If there are weapons, halting of weapons shipments to Israel, if there are sanctions placed on Israel, if there are suspensions of free trade agreements with Israel, then I think Israel's going to wind up paying attention. Europe missed a big opportunity last week by deciding not to take any action on the various association agreements that it has with Israel. And I think that was an important political step that was missed.
Great to get your input. Michael Lynk, former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territory. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more, let's bring in Steve Dorsey. He's a spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Steve, welcome to DW. Deir al Balah is a major hub for aid agencies. What are you hearing about the situation on the ground from your colleagues there?
Well, listen, we have had long-standing concerns about the security and protection of humanitarian operations, not only there, but across the Gaza Strip, and protections for humanitarians. Since October 7th, 2023, we at the International Committee of the Red Cross have lost 6 staff members in Gaza. The most recent one, just this month, we announced a few days ago the death of our 6th colleague in Gaza. It is a key component, pillar of international humanitarian law that humanitarians and the critical infrastructure that civilians depend on, including aid facilities, healthcare facilities and hospitals and access to things like clean water distribution sites remain protected under IHL rules, and that must continue to be respected not only in Gaza but anywhere where there's armed conflict.
Yeah, the condolences for the loss of your colleague there. We heard the UN Secretary General condemning the raid on the WHO office in Deir al Balah. How does that make you feel about your colleagues in Gaza?
Obviously concerned for the safety of my colleagues. Just at our field hospital in Rafah not too long ago, a staff member was injured by a stray bullet. These are soft-sided tents that are set up as really temporary sites across Gaza. We had a patient, a 13-year-old boy, struck by a stray bullet in May, and he died just a few weeks ago. So we know how dangerous these operations can be, especially so close to the front lines of where the fighting is happening.
Yeah. Now, more broadly speaking, how are you expecting your operations to be affected by the new offensive in Deir al Balah?
Well, listen, our primary concern here, of course, is the security and safety of our staff in Gaza, but also it's protecting civilians and it's ensuring they have access to the need they have safely. They have that access to aid. Civilians should not be concerned about their own safety, the lives of themselves or their families, trying to get things like food or water or health care. We know that the situation continues to worsen in Gaza. We know that clean water is running dangerously low. Access to fuel for basic needs like cooking continues to be jeopardized. Healthcare facilities, the ones that remain, are struggling under the increasing, overwhelming capacity of healthcare needs in Gaza. And we've also been seeing signs of malnourishment in the people that we've been treating throughout Gaza. That's our primary concern, and we're continuing to urge for the respect of IHL, but also for a surge in aid capacity, especially in the north, which remains an area devastated by fighting and where it's difficult to find any aid.
How, if at all, do you communicate with the Israeli military to ensure the safety, not just of your staff, of course, on the ground, but also those in your care?
Yeah, everything we do in Gaza is in full transparency of Israel. They're occupying power in the Gaza Strip. Our aid distribution, our healthcare facilities, the whereabouts and locations of our staff and our office buildings are all clearly marked and also communicated regularly with Israel. Of course, we also have key dialogue with Israel and the IDF, along with Hamas. When we undertake aid operations, including in the last ceasefire agreement, we hope, of course, there will be an end to the fighting and another ceasefire that will provide for more humanitarian action. But in those agreements, typically we do things like facilitating the hostage releases. That, of course, is done in cooperation with Israel and visibility with Hamas, not only on the ground, but also in the diplomatic channels throughout the region as well.
In recent weeks, we've seen several mass casualty events involving people seeking aid. Is there anything your colleagues there are able to do to help people stay out of harm's way?
Yeah, the best thing we can do is be there for when they need us. We're talking about 3,500 people hurt trying to get access to aid, they tell us, primarily food aid in the south of the Gaza Strip near Rafah. That's where our field hospital is. The overwhelming majority are gunshot victims. Some also report to us that they were hurt by shrapnel. Many have died. Hundreds have died. I think more than 250 people have died, pronounced dead in many cases on arrival at our facility there. This is a 60-bed field hospital. So when we talk about mass casualties, we're talking about exceeding by a large margin the capacity that we have in place at our field hospital. Sometimes it's more than 100 patients with stretchers laying on the floor, my colleagues tell us. with physical therapists supporting the emergency room, with orderlies helping nurses transport patients. This is a dire situation, not only at our healthcare facility, but at the few remaining hospitals that are left standing in Gaza.
Steve Dorsey, ICRC spokesperson in Washington, D.C., all the best to you and your colleagues.
Thank you.
Well, for more, let's bring in Tarik Jasarevic, the WHO spokesperson in Geneva. Tarik, your warehouse was attacked and members of your team detained. What more can you tell us?
Well, what happened is that Israeli military basically entered the premises where our staff was living and basically sent women and children on foot to other areas, and then took all the male residents. They handcuffed them, stripped them, and interrogated them. 4 people were detained, 3 of them later released, but one of our colleagues is still in detention, so we call for the immediate release of our colleague. And also, one of our main warehouses in Deir al Balah was also hit, and medical supplies that we had in are now lost. So it just gets to the horrible situation that is happening in Gaza, where now even our humanitarian operations will become more and more difficult as we have our own colleagues that are being displaced. So we have heard the statement, and I think this is really something that we should all support. We need really a way to provide what is needed to Gaza. People there are hungry, they are dying, they are sick, and our supplies are just minutes away without having a permit to get them in.
Now, can you still operate there?
Well, we will operate and we will continue to be there and do as much as we can. Throughout the war, we were trying to get to the most affected areas in north of Gaza, in hospitals that have been targeted, to try to evacuate patients, bring fuel, bring medical supplies. Quite often we were not given permits. Our requests for movement have been denied. So our humanitarian space was always narrow, and now it's getting even lesser. So we need really to do something that humanitarian organizations have enough of space to do what they are supposed to do. We will stay as long as we can. But again, we can do only as much as Israel allows us to do. And we hope that there will be some sort of a political solution that will, first of all, bring a ceasefire so people in Gaza are not constantly bombed and shot at, but also that we can do what we are supposed to do, and in our case, to support health workers of Gaza so they can provide medical care.
Now, with stores looted and the health system in tatters, how do people get treatment and basic healthcare needs?
Well, they don't. It's simple as that. It's hospitals run out of fuel, so we can't have an intensive care unit, we can't have a dialysis, we can't have incubators. There is no food. People are hungry. There is a malnutrition. Medical supplies are depleted. So whatever we brought in the past couple of weeks is nearly not enough to what I needed. Health workers are exhausted. They are also being displaced multiple times. And when we try to bring foreign medical teams, and there are foreign medical teams that are willing to come, and there are foreign medical teams that are operating within Gaza field hospitals, quite often they are denied visa. Just in past couple of months, 58 international medical personnel, including surgeons and specialists, were simply denied a visa to go and work inside Gaza.
Thank you very much, Tarik Jasarevic, WHO spokesperson, talking to us from Geneva.
Thank you.